Hello, everybody. It's good to be back on the second part of this talk about Los Cedros. And I am here with Dr. Roo Vandegrift, who has been, I hope I'm saying that right, Roo, am I? Who has been studying the ecology of fungi for a long time in Los Cedros and has made some amazing discoveries. So we will be talking a bit with Roo and also about his upcoming documentary, Marrow of the Mountain. But so first of all, to welcome you, Roo, hi. But what we're going to do before we get into the chat is we're going to just go to Los Cedros through audio. We're just going to go and listen to what it actually sounds like there. Because for so many of us that have never, been blessed to be in such an incredibly biodiverse place, it's hard to imagine what it's like. It is just very green, but there's so much noise and we can't see what's going on. But to just give you a little idea of what it is like in Los Cedros. So I've got 3 pieces of audio I'm going to share with you. The first is just the baseline sound of the insects, just the life in Los Cedros. In the middle of the day, this is what it sounds like. Then we're going to listen to the toucan. And I think most people know what a toucan looks like. This amazing bird with this massive bill. But what do they sound like? And then thirdly is the howler monkey, which kind of sounds like a dog barking. But actually it's this amazing sound, one of the loudest mammals on earth, and what the howler monkey sounds like. So we're going to just sit back and just for a few seconds just listen to the sound. So I also encourage people to close their eyes and have a listen to what it sounds like. So that's just set the scene a little bit for us and just given us like a brief glimpse into the sound of Los Cedros. But although, there's all this life going on and we can hear it, what Roo really studies, you don't get to see much of it. And this world beneath our feet, which is just, this kind of undiscovered realm. And so Roo, please welcome to the Solutions podcast. And yes, love to hear from you.
Thanks for having me, Nicola. It's great to be here. Really appreciate it. And the sounds take me right back to Los Cedros. I wish I could be there right now, all the time. I wish I could be there, honestly. It's an incredible place. But yeah, and it's true. I work on the fungi. I've been working at Los Cedros since, 2012, I guess. So a whole decade now. I started going to Los Cedros during my PhD for my dissertation research. And I've done a lot of the work that I've done has been on the ecology of what we call endophytes, the fungi that live within the leaves of the plants. And so, you say this hidden world under our feet, but it's also this hidden world all around us. Every plant you see, like whether you're in this incredibly biodiverse tropical rainforest in Ecuador or, in the temperate forests or, even your houseplants, like when you see a plant, you're not just looking at a plant. Just like humans have a microbiome, we have this incredible diversity of microbes, bacteria and other microbes in our guts and on our skin. Plants have a microbiome too. And the microbiome of plants has this incredibly large component that is fungal. fungi that live symbiotically with the plants, with their leaves, with their stems, with their roots. And so that's what I studied, looking at the relationship between particular fungi in the leaves of plants in this tropical rainforest. And it's been a joy and a privilege to be able to study in a place like Los Cedros.
So have you got any ideas of, like, ballpark figure, how many different kinds of fungi do we think we're looking at in Los Cedros?
Well, there's multiple different ways to answer that question, Nicola. I think in general, we know in the world that we don't have a very good idea of the number of species of fungi that there are, we haven't described very many of them. There's been estimates that, for animals, we've described 90% of the large animals on the planet. We know what most of them are. There's a handful hiding in these, these rare places, these very local, endemic, endangered species that we haven't found yet. For plants, we've got a pretty good idea of how many vascular plants there are in the world. We've described most of them. For fungi, though, the estimate is that we've only described somewhere between 2 and 10% of all the fungi in the world.
Wow.
Science. Most fungi have never been described by science. And that's because most fungi are cryptic, like we're talking about. They're hidden in the soil or as symbionts in the plants. But one of the ways that we can estimate the number of fungi, we know in places where they've been really well studied, places like England or Sweden or Switzerland, where there's been extensive research that goes back, into the Middle Ages, really, where we have a really good idea of all of the plants and all of the fungi. There seems to be this ratio. For every plant species in a habitat, there are about 6 fungal species. It's about 6 times as many fungi as there are plants. And so in Los Cedros, we have a pretty good estimate for the number of trees. We know that there are about 500 species of tree, not plants, just trees in Los Cedros. And so if we say, okay, well, there's 500 species of trees, that means for every tree, there must be 6 species of fungi, at least, because remember, those are temperate zone estimates. It's probably higher in the tropics. So then, what's 500 times 6? My brain is not able to do this simple math right now. 2,000 species of fungi just associated with the trees, right? And so we know that there's this incredible diversity of fungi at Los Cedros that we don't know about. Another way that we can start to get at, well, what species of fungi are there is just by going out and collecting fungi. And so we've been going out and collecting fungi at Los Cedros, macroscopic fruiting bodies, right? Like mushrooms. So we're not talking about like all of the microscopic fungi that live in the soil, that live in the leaves. We're just talking about the fungi that make mushrooms. And so those fungi, we can go out and collect and we can say, okay, well, we have some idea. The more we collect, the more we find. And because so many fungi are undescribed, it's hard to say how many species of fungi we've collected, because most of them, we don't have good descriptions of species. But we can make a pretty good estimate of how many genera, so the next taxonomic group that we have, taxonomic ordering. And so we know out of the last 10 years that we've collected about 300 genera of fungi, which is just an incredible diversity of mushrooms. And so that probably is representing, 1,000 different species, right? So for every genus we've collected, there's probably, we've collected multiple times, and probably every collection is a different species. The diversity is insane. And we can talk about, of the things that we've been able to really dig into, of those collections we've made, we know we've collected at least 4 things that are under consideration for the IUCN Red List Fungal Initiative, which is significant for a number of reasons, right? Like, this is recognition that these are rare and potentially endangered species. But it's particularly notable in that the IUCN Red List Initiative is only just beginning to examine fungi. So the red list has examined tens of thousands of plants and animals, but they've only really examined a few hundred fungal species. And so the fact that
Oh, Roo's just dropped out there for a moment, but I'm sure he'll be coming back any second. But I mean, what reminds me in Los Cedros about this diversity was all the different colors of fungi that, I mean, I saw these beautiful pink coral looking ones, and there were blue and green and orange. I mean, it really was like an absolute kaleidoscope of colors. And, you know, I'm hoping Roo's going to come out of the freeze mode and be able to tell us, I mean, why? Why is there such diversity of fungi? What are they doing? It's this world that we know so little about. And although often people think that, you know, well, fungi are just these mushrooms, and the only time that, you know, really we have is the kind of like mushrooms on a pizza, and people don't really know much more about the fungi or fungi world, depending on where you come from. But actually, you know, all bread and cheese and beer and, you know, so much of what we eat is totally dependent on fungi. So there's so much that we really need to know, like, why and what is it doing? So there's this absolutely fantastic book for anyone that, you know, is interested in this fungal world, not just beneath our feet, like you know, Roo has discovered how there's all this fungi that actually lives in living plants. And I think a lot of us, or I myself included, just really thought they were used for decomposition, and that they would be found in the forest floor. But instead, they are found, you know, like throughout living leaves as well. And so they're already there. And so when they do start to break down, of course, they've got a head start. But this kind of question of, like, you know, what are they actually doing there? And this symbiotic relationship that they often have with the other species that they live with. So it really is an extraordinary other world. And there's this fantastic book by Merlin Sheldrake, and I highly recommend to anyone to check it out. It's called Entangled Lives. And it's probably, well, as far as I'm concerned, the best book I've ever read about fungi and these other kingdoms, and lichen, which is this symbiotic relationship between fungi and algae. And they even found that in the lab, they can separate out the fungi and the algae back into these two separate life forms. So it really is an absolutely extraordinary world. And so there's so much to be learned. And so we seem to have lost Roo, and I'm going to go looking for him. So just hold with me one moment. And oh, hang on, before I said it, and he is back. Yep. So Roo, can you hear us? You've reappeared. I can see his name that has come up on the screen, so I know he's there somewhere. And hopefully he can answer that question that I have just been thinking. I was just explaining, Roo, about, you know, the incredible colors of the fungi that I saw in Los Cedros, and how I just was wondering, what are they doing? You know, why is there such diversity? I mean, everything's got a niche. Everything fulfills a need in the forest and the ecosystem. And, you know, so why do we think that kingdom, and I think a lot of people actually, you know, there are still a lot of people that think that fungi are plants, that, you know, they aren't, no, they are, I read somewhere that they are actually closer to mammals than to plants. Is that true? But they have their own kingdom. And what are they doing? Why does there need to be so much diversity?
Lots to unpack there, Nicola. They are closer to animals than they are to plants. So we have, you know, the three major kingdoms of eukaryote life, the plants and the animals and the fungi. And the animals and the fungi have a more recent common ancestor than that lineage does with the plants, which split off earlier. And why do they need to have such diversity? And it relates back to this long evolutionary history that fungi have with plants. Fungi and
Uh-oh. We've lost Roo again. Well, I suppose this is what happens when we are using the wonder of technology.
Zoom.
So here he comes. He's back.
Here, we're back. We're back.
You're in the flow. You're in the flow.
All right. Well, no, it comes down to this evolutionary history that exists between fungi and plants. The relationship between fungi and plants goes all the way back to the colonization of land by plants. When life first came out of the primordial oceans and crept up onto land, it was fungi that allowed plants to first take root upon the sort of virgin soils of the continents. The relationship of what's called arbuscular mycorrhizae, it's one of the oldest groups of fungi. We have fossils of these fungi with some of the earliest plants known to exist. Actually from the UK, it's what's called the Rhynie Chert up in Scotland as a kind of a fossil bed. And we can see these intricate fungal structures where the fungi and the plants are coexisting. And it's theorized, this is how fungi were able to help plants move from in the water, where they have all of the water and they have all of the resources just flowing around them, to up on this super harsh environment of on dry land. And so they helped the plants come up. And so there's been this tight relationship between fungi and plants for the entire evolutionary history of plants on land. So when you're in a place like Los Cedros with this incredible diversity of plants, we also have all of these fungi that have evolutionary histories going all the way back. So, what organisms are there helping them as microbial symbionts? Well, they're fungi. What organisms are there eating the plants after the plants have died? Well, those are fungi as well. Well, what organisms are the diseases of the plants? Well, those are fungi as well, right? So it's like the fungi, any potential interaction you can have with a plant, there's a fungus that does it. They go back and forth. So, that's where all of these niches, every single plant creates niches. It creates nutritional niches where there's these nutritional symbioses where the fungus goes out and scavenges nutrients and brings them back for the plant. It creates these disease niches. You can have diseases of the leaves, diseases of the stems, diseases of the roots, right? So all of those niches are available for every single plant. They're all very host specific. And, there are definitely some fungi that are, they've evolved to take a wide range of hosts, but most are pretty host specific. And then it's not just the plants as well. Over evolutionary time, fungi have shifted to all these different niches where they can utilize other food sources. They can infect other things. Cordyceps is an excellent example. We see an incredible diversity of insect infecting Cordyceps fungi at Los Cedros, and in these tropical forests in general. And this is it's an evolutionary mechanism to hold these different groups of insects in check. Insects are very good at reproduction, right? They have these populations that bloom and expand. But as soon as you get a large number of any particular kind of insect, they become a target. It's the more insects there are, the higher probability there is for the fungal spores of their host-specific cordyceps to find them. And then that controls that population. It'll bring the population back down below the threshold where the cordyceps are easily able to find them. And it creates a balance. Too many insects, more cordyceps. Too much cordyceps, less insects. And they balance themselves out. And that happens for every insect in the forest. They have their own controlling fungus. And so it's just one example of the way that fungi and fungal diseases in particular lead to ecological balance and coexistence of diversity.
Wow, it is incredible. And anyone that doesn't know about cordyceps, they're also known as like the zombie fungi. And I was giving a presentation at a school one time, and I had a photograph, and I've taken some amazing photos of cordyceps. And I was explaining to the kids how there are these ants, and they start acting really strange and waving their arms and legs around, and then they get propelled to climb up a tree, and then the fungus just grows straight up out the top of its head. kills the ant, and then its spores can also spread far and wide through the forest. And
Behavior modification is insane.
This one little kid put his hand up and he said, could that happen to humans? I was like, well, who knows? So yeah, I mean, the cordyceps is just, and you know, it's also been used in Chinese medicine for a very long time. And there's a huge, you know, medicinal area that is only just starting to be explored. And I think when we look at Los Cedros and we think of the potential of the medicine in Los Cedros, that there's so much, as Roo just explained, so much that is unexplored. We don't know what it's called, what it does, and how, you know, we could work in partnerships together.
Exactly. No, the diversity of places like Los Cedros, you know, we talk about needing to preserve these places because they have intrinsic value, right? Like these organisms have a right to exist. There's this, you know, the other argument to be made is that they also have value to us as people, you know, because we have this. Think of it like a bank of biological diversity with potential utility that we haven't discovered yet. And the more diverse, the more potential utility that there is.
And Roo also helped me when I came up with this crazy idea, and an amazing group of people, which has now formed an organization called Rebalance Earth. Back in the early days, I was asked for Earth Protectors for Ecocide to speak with the amazing Ian Redmond OBE, who worked a lot with Diana Fossey and the gorillas. And so we were doing a double act. I was talking about why the Amazon was important, and Ian was talking about why Africa is important. And I was explaining about the threats to Los Cedros of mining, and that we had this court case coming up at the Constitutional Court. And, you know, we were trying to come up with every argument as to why these amazing places need to be saved. And sadly, you know, for some people, biodiversity isn't important. And we could have all the scientists telling us about all these critically endangered species, but was that going to be enough? And when it was suggested to me, well, why don't you put an economic value on Los Cedros and bring that up in the court case? Well, I mean, to start with, I thought it was totally crazy, because you cannot possibly value a place like Los Cedros for its intrinsic value. And how on earth could you value all this biodiversity? I mean, we were able to value just the carbon stocks. And I will be talking to Ralph in next month's podcast about this, about valuing nature. I mean, where does this come from, this idea, and where has it got a place in the future? And it's not actually, you know, putting a price on an animal's head. It is valuing the services that it provides us with. But this did bring us to a conversation, Roo, when we had this very exciting little moment of the X Prize, you know, funded by Elon Musk, you know, like $100 million, this huge amount to find a way of actually valuing biodiversity. So it's one of the big questions as we face this, you know, climate and ecological collapse, that surely these jewels of our planet, like Los Cedros, it's critical that we find ways to save them. And if sadly, in this world where we only value money, and at the moment where, you know, nature is only valued when it's dead, either timber or, you know, but how could we actually value it alive? And so this is how we got talking, Roo, about, well, how could we maybe look at the pharmaceutical industry and the potential? So I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that, and what we were thinking about creating some amazing machine that could tell us.
Well, you know, I think it is one of these big open questions, right? We're trying to create incentives to preserve these incredibly biodiverse places within the framework of the world as it exists right now. And the world as it exists right now definitely puts an emphasis on economic value. And so one of the, you know, we talk about these potentials, we have this incredible diversity of fungi, most of which is still unexplored in places like Los Cedros. And we know fungi, you know, in the last century, most of the life-changing drugs that have been discovered have come from fungi. We think about like cyclosporin, the drug that allows for organ transplants. We think of all of our antibiotics, penicillin being the first great example. Penicillin was discovered from an accidental experiment where a sandwich was left to mold in a drawer in a laboratory, right? And we have all of these examples where fungi are the key to new bioactive molecules useful in human medicine. And so is there a way we can correlate some measure of diversity with some probability of discovering a pharmaceutically viable chemical? And so that was the big idea. And and I don't have a clean answer. We kind of put that project down for a number of reasons. One of which is it is really hard to quantify the economic potential of any particular drug discovery chemical, and then the next chain, the probability of discovering a chemical versus the biological diversity is a link that we need more research to work out. But I do still think this is a viable path to going from a raw biodiversity estimate to a raw numerical value estimate, is to use this pharmaceutical potential. There's a lot of interesting potential there for being able to put some kind of a dollar value on at least microbial biodiversity, which does correlate with other forms of biodiversity, which does not necessarily mean that I think that, I think that in the end, as a society, we have to move past the need for a dollar value on places like this, right? We need to recognize the intrinsic value and the literally unquantifiable value that places like this have for the earth and for humanity, right? As if we literally can't live without places like this, and that is, the value is literally infinite. There is no way to put a dollar value on it because it just busts through the top of the graph, right? And so, I think when we're making these arguments in the context of the world as it is right now, it's really important to be able to have ways to pin these dollar values so that people who only listen to dollar signs will listen. But in the end, we have to move beyond those dollar signs and figure out a way to value these things as a culture, as a people, as humanity, in a way that will lead to their preservation and protection, and hopefully expansion over the next several centuries, so that we're not constantly trying to use our flawed system of economics to justify the preservation of the last remaining wildernesses on the planet.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads on to us talking a bit about your upcoming documentary, which, is giving voice to people who, like us, which, are giving voices to nature, a voice to the voiceless. And, and there are certain individuals that go, way beyond and do whatever is needed to stand up for nature. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about Marrow of the Mountain.
Yeah, Marrow of the Mountain. This is a project that started with scientific work at Los Cedros, actually. When these mining concessions were first announced, everybody scrambled and we got a little bit of funding from National Geographic to lead a scientific expedition up into the highlands of Los Cedros, where nobody had ever done any biodiversity exploring. And we had botanists and we had herpetologists and we had mycologists and primatologists and ornithologists, and we had everybody. It was great. From the US and from Ecuador, it was this really wonderful collaborative research group. We took about 20 people for a month, way up into the rainforest. And in the end, we said, well, we're doing this incredible expedition. We should film it. And so I was talking to some folks in Oregon, where I used to live, and my friend Dylan is a filmmaker. They have their degree from the University of British Columbia, their film production program. And they said, well, I can come and we can make a little film. And so we started with this idea for a little short film about this scientific expedition. And as soon as we got to Ecuador, it became really obvious that the situation, mining in Ecuador, and all of the complexity and nuance that we needed more than that. We needed a feature film. And so Dylan went off. We talked to all of our Ecuadorian friends, and we found this woman, Solange Yepes. And so Solange Yepes and Dylan Starwalt are co-directing together. So we have an American and an Ecuadorian co-director. And then I just gave it to them and we're like, okay, you guys make the movie you want to make. And then 6 months later, they looped back and were like, Roo, we need a producer. Will you produce for us? I was like, I don't know what being a movie producer is, but sure, I can do that. So that was an adventure. And then we got this other woman, Antonella Carrasco, who to be our director of photography and our editor. So we've got this tight team. There's 4 of us, 2 Ecuadorians and 2 Americans. And we've been working on this documentary now since this biodiversity expedition in 2018, which is wild. And so Dylan and Solange traveled all around the region around Los Cedros. They did more than 50 interviews, just talking to people, working on both sides of these mining issues to really get a sense of what's going on in the communities, what's going on with the people around mining. And we've ended up settling, we've got 3 women that we're focusing this documentary on. So the documentary follows Filomeno Rosero, who's a leader of the indigenous Awa group on the Colombian border. It's one of the closest indigenous groups to Los Cedros as the crow flies. Isabel Anangono, who is an Afro-Ecuadorian campesina farmer and activist in the Intag Valley, which is just a little bit over to the east from Los Cedros, a little bit to the east of Los Cedros. The Intag Valley is the region in Ecuador that has been fighting mining for the longest period of time. They've been fighting mining all the way back into the 80s. And then the third main character is Elisa Levy, who's the research coordinator for Los Cedros and a specialist in butterflies who came with us on this biodiversity expedition. And so through these 3 women, an indigenous woman, an Afro-Ecuadorian, and then Elisa is of European and mestizo descent. And so we have these 3 different women. The indigenous woman, she's studying nursing, and she works in this indigenous culture. Isabel is Afro-Ecuadorian campesina farmer. She's been farming the same land for her entire life and working in these communities for her entire life. She says she was born in the Intag Valley and she'll die in the Intag Valley. Elisa is a biologist. She's been working. She co-founded Omasne, a mining observatory nonprofit in northern Ecuador to help educate communities and keep an eye on these mining companies as they come in. And so we've got these 3 different women represent 3 different walks of life, 3 different parts of the culture of Ecuador, which is this incredibly multicultural country, despite being a relatively small country. And through the lens of these 3 women, we examine on with of Ecuador, where the mine. Yeah, with Elisa, we traveled to the south of Ecuador, where the largest mining projects in Ecuador are. When this push for mining development first started, it was a couple of these projects in the south that were able to accelerate and really move as fast as possible. And so the future that we're seeing, the potential future that we're seeing for the north of Ecuador, for the Intag Valley, for the Awa territory, for Los Cedros, we can travel to the south of Ecuador and get a glimpse into what is that potential future if mining is allowed to go forward in these incredibly biodiverse protected forests. And so we visited the Mirador mining project in the Cordillera del Condor, which is this super biodiverse, it's this range of mountains on the east side of the Andes in southern Ecuador that has this incredible endemic flora. It's one of the most biodiverse places in the world. And they've opened this incredibly massive pit mine right in the middle of this untouched, gorgeous forest. And to make space for the mine, the government in 2015 dispossessed an entire community. It was a community of mostly indigenous people, of Shuar people. The military and the mining company security forces and the police showed up in the middle of the night, 4 in the morning, and they said, okay, everybody, you have to leave. You have to leave your houses, take what you can carry. And as the people watched, they knocked their houses down to make room for this mining development. This was one of the founding, like this was all over the news in 2015. It's not even that long ago, 2015. That's less time than since I've been working in Ecuador. And Elisa and her friends in the north saw this on the news, and they said, if this can happen there, this can happen here in our home. And so they founded Omasne, this mining observatory, in part because of what happened in Tundaime with the Mirador mining project, this dispossession. And so with Elisa, we talked to people who were part of that. We talked to this guy, this fellow William, who was actually working for the mining company at the time, and lost his home. We stood up on this hill and he, looked down at this giant tailings dam, and he's like, well, that was where my house was, and that was where the school was. And then, because of an injury he sustained while working for the mining company, he couldn't continue working, and they fired him. And so, these mining companies, they come in with this rhetoric about how we're creating jobs for the local communities, and this is, this is better for everybody, but then they don't. They can't keep their promises.
I mean, I think that has been all of our major worry with Los Cedros. We've gone and we've seen what mining has done. I mean, I've sadly had 20 years of it in Ecuador since working there in 2000, and I've seen a huge legacy of destruction. And so, yes, I mean, I think that's what really compelled us all to do whatever we could to raise awareness of the mining issue so that we could prevent it from happening. And, and thankfully, this precedent-setting rights of nature case, which, we're still kind of in denial. It is actually, Los Cedros has been saved for right now. All is good. But I really thought that was going to mean that all of the other 186 other protected forests were saved. But sadly, although Los Cedros sets a precedent, each time that they're going to want to activate, it's over 500 mining concessions. So anyway, we have got this precedent. We have recognized the importance of biodiversity. And, just to end up actually just tying this all in with mining, one of the first projects that I founded in Ecuador was the Amazon Myco Renewal Project. And I brought a team of mycologists to Ecuador to actually look at the potential of myco remediation and using fungi to break down oil spills. And, we were able to show it on a small scale using Pleurotus austriatus, the common oyster mushroom that you can buy in a supermarket. We were able to show that we could break down the oil spills that have been left behind by Chevron Texaco. So we were able to show that on a small scale, but take it to the next level took a lot of money. And sadly, that's not what we had. But it just was able to show the local people also, look, there is potential. We can clean this mess up, and the potential of using fungi in the future for remediation of these, these disastrous mining big messes that they've left behind throughout the country and around the world. So I think we'll leave it there. We've given loads of information to the listeners, and I hope people have had a glimpse into the world of, these incredible little gems of our planet, these Noah's Arks, these places where so much life exists, and why it's so important that we do all that we can to protect them. And thanks so much, Roo, for all your work and for coming in. And check out Marrow of the Mountain People if you haven't already. And we look forward to seeing it when it's released.
Yep. And, thanks so much, Nicola. It's been great to be here. If anybody wants more information, there's a ton of video content and information on our website. It's just marrowofthemountain.com, marrow like bone marrow. There is a little donate button. We're actually in the middle of an editing retreat to put together our first full cut of the film. Our team is in Ecuador working right now. And so every dollar counts. It helps to push that work forward. And all of our Ecuadorian colleagues have been just very clear that this movie is the movie we need for international exposure of this conflict, this crisis that's happening in Ecuador right now. And so we're working as hard as we can to make that happen. So check it out, marrowofthemountain.com.
Yay.
Thanks for having me on, Nicola. This has been wonderful.
And also, if anyone wants to see a bit of history, then my film, Solution to the Pollution, Mycoremediation in the Amazon, also
it's wonderful.
The studies that we did in our little kind of small world and how we went about. So Solution to the Pollution, Mycoremediation in the Amazon. And if you really want a whole real look into it, then Blood of the Amazon is still up and shows the kind of history of, you know, me discovering that.
It's on YouTube, yeah?
It is on YouTube. Yeah. So I will put the links up as well. And thank you, Roo, and hope to speak again sometime. And the next podcast will be with Ralph, who we've all spoken, who's the assistant director of the IMF and has been working on doing whatever he can, you know, to bring this into this kind of financial reality of we've got to pull out all the stops to do whatever we can to save these precious places. So thanks again, Roo, and over and out. Bye.
Thanks, Nicola. Bye.
Bye.